America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Vice Chair, please read our mission statement.
Marshall Public Schools develops the potential of each learner for success in a changing world.
Thank you. And moving on to our agenda, do we have a motion to approve? And I'll second. Any additions? Hearing none, please vote. It is approved. Public forum. Is there anybody in the public that'd like to approach the board? Our presentation, ELA Standards Information, presented by the famous Amanda Amanda. AG.
Grin and auger.
Green Auger. Got it.
I was just schooling Scott on that earlier today.
Yep. Okay, very good. You have to work with us, you know. It's
always a tough one.
It's always a teaching experience, right?
Yep, it's a tough one. So if you were to say it like it looks, it's grin-a-jur. So. Well, I wouldn't want you guys to start your summer without a presentation from me. I've been thinking it's been a while since I've been here, and as I look back over the year, I've done a lot of presentations, but none of them have been on curriculum, which is really should be my main focus in the school and my biggest job, to make sure that our kids are getting what they need. So I wanted to take some time today to talk about our ELA standards. So what I want to do today is just give you a brief introduction on some history of how they were developed and basics of their content and organizational structure. Tricia told me I had about 15 to 20 minutes, so I really could take a full day to talk about these, so I'm going to do my best to get as much information to you as possible in this time. Here are some basic words that I hope that you'll have a better understanding of by the time my presentation is over. But just a reminder that ELA is the English Language Arts Standards, because I will be using the ELA abbreviation a lot. So, because I'm only going to be able to do a brief description of our standards, I did want to give you the information that you would need to find these on your own if you wanted to. If you go to the MDE website, click on the Educator's Excellence, click on Standards, Curriculum, and Instruction, then click on K-12 Academic Standards. Seems like a lot of steps, but you can see they're right here on this slide. So if you need to reference, go back to this slide and take a look. And there's also at the bottom of this slide, which you can't see, well, I can't see because I'm short, but there is a link to a direct link, so you could copy and paste that as well. But then you would want to click on the English Language Arts right there, and that'll get you to a lot of information on our English Language Arts standards for Minnesota. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, that's where you'll click on another link to open up the actual document. It looks like this, and is 88 pages long. So you need some reading. It's a good place to go. I'm sure you've all heard that we have adopted the Common Core in Minnesota. We have adopted it in language arts, but not in math. And when you adopt the Common Core in a subject, I just kind of wanted you to have this visual that this is how it works. The Common Core is central to our standards and for language arts. And then Minnesota and any state who adopts the Common Core can add an additional 15% of content that they feel was missing or would enhance the standards as they were written. When you adopt the Common Core, though, you do have to adopt it word for word. So we have it word for word with an additional 15% of our own Minnesota-specific content. And I'll get to what that ended up being in a little bit. And then if districts choose, they can also add content on top of that. And so I just think this is a really good visual to help you kind of wrap your brain around that. And this decision was governed by a transparent and standardized process. And if you want to learn more about that process, if you go to this document on page 5, there's a very descriptive information on how we went about that. And basically in 2009, Minnesota worked with the committee that was working on this, and that's on our next slide of who that is, and were participating in revisions and putting in input. And then in 2010, with the final document, we did decide to adopt the Common Core standards. So again, who is creating this? Who created this? Who are the people that started this initiative? And it was a council of the Chief State School Officers and the National Governors Association, along with a lot of other input from other companies and educators, parents, students. A wide range of people had input in this, and there was a lot of rounds of, here's where we're at, how can we improve it and make it better?
So who are the chief state school officers? Are those education directors of each state?
Yeah, like the commissioners, like our state commissioner. Yes, exactly. And I just want to add, too, that their work was built on the foundation laid by states who have done decades of work on this. So it wasn't just something that was started brand new. There's been a lot of work in this area. But they really feel that the standards are research and evidence-based, they're aligned with college and work expectations, they're rigorous and internationally benchmarked. So what are the products of the Common Core state standards in ELA? Obviously, the biggest one is our standards document, which really just states what our K through 12 students need to know and be able to do to be successful after high school, to be college and career ready. Also, they have these 3 appendixes that are listed there, and those are there to help schools understand the standards. There's a lot of misconception, though, about what the Common Core is and isn't. And they are not those 3 things that I have listed. It's not a national curriculum. This is a decision made at the state and local levels. So, and it's not a set of national procedures either. I mentioned earlier.
Amanda, so
Yeah.
the Common Core that's been accepted in California is different than the Common Core that we're doing?
No, it would be the same.
So that'd be a national.
48 states have adopted it, but it's not been mandated that we had to, just like we didn't adopt math.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
If I'm not mistaken, Amanda, the Common Core is like the core of our English language arts standards, but then Minnesota has others, and even
Yeah.
districts may have their
Right.
own standards.
Correct. And they're just, we've always had standards. Every state has always had standards. Really the goal of the Common Core is to have some alignment for those students who are moving from state to state so that things are not completely different if students are moving around, if teachers are moving around, that there is a set standard that everyone has to meet at a grade level so that teachers and parents and students know where their child should be. And it is also just a framework for what needs to happen. That it doesn't mean that we can't do above and beyond that as well.
So it's like a basic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And why not math?
Minnesota felt that our standards were more rigorous than the Common Core.
They were better.
Better,
essentially.
yeah.
When you say are,
Well, the Minnesota has math standards, and the committee that was working on that, there was a math committee that worked on it just like there was a language arts committee.
yeah.
They made that decision, and they actually came around the state when it was that time. I remember going to those meetings and getting input from people, and I think there was a fear that we'd be stepping backwards if we adopted the math Common Core. Good questions. I mentioned earlier that we added some pieces to the Common Core state standards, and these are some of the things that we've added. Minnesota American Indian Tribes, some creative writing, and the media literacy, which I think is very important, especially in our global technology-rich environment and world that we live in. And I guess I just want to point out, too, that in Minnesota, how the standards are delivered, with which materials and by which measures they are assessed is left to local decision-making. I think that's just very important to point out as well in this process. And then also that our statewide MCAs are aligned to our state ELA standards, so they would include these extra pieces that we've added. So to give you a basic understanding or overview of our academic standards, this chart is very useful, and I'm going to kind of break it down for you. And again, this is also included in this document if you want to refer back to it, because I know this is riveting and you're going to want to study it. Let's take a look first at that top section. these are the standards, or the sections that we have for the standards. For the first one in blue here, these are standards for English language arts and literacy and history, social studies, science, and technical subjects in grades K through 5. So the majority of the work is done in the classroom, and that's why I believe they did K-5, because I believe that most K through 5 classrooms are self-contained, and the classroom teacher probably works in all those subject areas. And so they can do those pieces in the K-5 classroom. Then in grades 6 through 12, in the green shaded area, these are standards for English language arts, so what happens in our language arts classrooms, taught by our language arts teachers. And this is something new and something that I think is a big deal, and something that wasn't there before, is that we now have standards in literacy, in history, social studies, science, and technical subjects, grades 6 through 12. So we'll be talking about that as we move on. But
Common Core standards or Minnesota?
they're Common Core that have been adopted by Minnesota. And what that means really is that standards for reading and writing are being addressed in other classrooms other than our language arts classrooms, which I think is huge, because one of the things that we're trying to do, and I'll talk about this in a little bit too, is increase the reading levels of our students, because what we're finding is that students who go to college are not ready for entry-level college classes, and we have to do a lot of remediation. So it's great that we're actually asking these teachers to help in this area to work with reading and writing. And I've got
When you talk about not ready, are you talking about our district, or are you talking about the
statewide, national. It's a national problem. So, for example, kids will go and take the entrance exams and not be at the level they need to be and have to do some remediation classes that they have to pay for but don't count towards college. So this is an example of the literacy and history, social studies, science, and technical subjects. Pretty soon I'm going to just start saying non-ELA courses, so that's what I'm meaning when I'm just going to cut all that out. There are 30 standards that we have to hit as a district in grades 6 through 12. And it uses grade bands. So one time when a student is going through 6, 7, and 8, one time when they're in 9th and 10th, and one time when they're in 11th and 12th, they have to have a course that offers the standards. There's 10 of them in reading for history, 10 of them in reading for science and technical subjects, 10 of them in writing for the non-ELA courses. So you have 30 standards that you should hit at least. You have to have those one time during 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. In 9th grade, it's the same. You have these 30 standards, and you have to hit them in 9th and 10th, and then the same thing in 11th and 12th. So you can see that additional emphasis that we're putting on the reading and writing for students. So they're getting it not just in their language arts classes, but also in these other classes. And these teachers were doing a lot of this already. We've done a lot of work this year documenting where this is happening and making sure that we are hitting all of those. And that's been really fun for me to get to see all the work that's happening in our classrooms. And I can guarantee you that we are hitting those marks. And we finally got to a point, too, where we had to say, we're going to stop documenting everything because we just need to make sure that we're hitting it this time, so we know that these other departments are hitting it as well. But let's just make sure we have this documented in case MDE comes out and says, can you show us where you're hitting those reading standards in grade bands 9 through 10. So that's it's been great. It's been fun, and working with the reading specialists at each building to help get that done. And obviously all the teachers in those areas. We've been talking a lot about a technical subject, so I get that question a lot. Well, what is a technical section or subject? And in the Appendix A of the Common Core Standards, it says, a course devoted to practical studies such as engineering, technology, design, business, or other work-related subject, a technical aspect of a wider field of studies such as art or music. So you can see it covers a lot of different areas. And I've already mentioned the grade bands, and I just want to point out that with our K through 5, we don't have any grade bands. It's really for our language arts teachers, it's at the high school level. And the reasoning for that is because we want to allow some flexibility in the high school for course design. So I think that's helpful and needed at that level. And then with our the ones we were just talking about, we have grade bands for all of them, for 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 in our non-ELA courses. Do you guys understand the grade bands? That makes sense? Yeah. So then the next section of that chart that I originally showed you when it was all together are the strands. So these are the strands that fall underneath each one of those sections. So in blue, which are K through 5, we have the reading, writing, speaking, viewing, listening, and media literacy and language. Same thing for our 6 through 12 ELA teachers. And then with our non-ELA classes for 6 through 12, they're just focusing on that reading and writing. And again, I just think it's important that we acknowledge that shared responsibility for success in reading and writing across all curriculum areas, that it's everybody's responsibility to make sure that our kids are getting where they need to be. And again, I think you've also heard me talk a lot about the college and career readiness. And because the standard document was backwards mapped using a set of college and career ready anchor standards, and one of the things that I want to talk to you about today is the work that came out of that. It's on this sheet. Did you get those handed out? I'm sorry. Here they come. Here come some handouts. This document, I just think, is a really good visual to help you understand where we were at. And I'll just wait for everyone to get a copy. And those college and career readiness standards really represent what students need to know to be able to do in order to succeed in college and the workforce, which was what we've been talking about throughout this presentation. This document on the left side shows you where we were or have been in regards to where kids need to be when they finish high school. You can see that there's a gap. So we had this gap here. And so what we're trying to do and what these Common Core Standards has done is we have raised the level of reading that we want kids to be at each grade level. And so in the blue is where the Lexile ranges are now. And so you can see that in K and 1, things don't really change. It starts in second grade where that level starts to increase. And so we're really trying to increase the rigor and the depth of reading that our students can do to help them be college and career ready by the time they hit 12th grade. So again, I just thought this was a really helpful chart for me when I was first learning about this, that kind of was, wow, we had some work to do. We can't be sending off so many kids to college and having them have to do remediation, or sending them off to the workplace and their employers having to do remediation for them to get to where they need to be. So also on this chart, learning progressions are anchored in the Common Core Standards, and so you're going to hear me talk about anchor standards. And again, those have come from the College and Career Readiness Standards, and they are in this Common Core document. And then the steps of those progressions at each grade level are known as benchmarks, and so we're going to get to take a look at some benchmarks as well. So what does it mean to be college and career ready? Because again, that's something I keep talking about. I keep mentioning college and career ready. And this definition, which comes out of the 2014 Minnesota Session Laws, you can see the source at the bottom. It basically says that students are prepared to successfully begin a post-secondary program or enter a new career pathway without need for remediation. So how many Common Core anchor standards are there? Let's take a look. In your handouts, you should have a blue document, and these are our anchor standards. So we had our strands, which were the reading, the writing, the viewing and listening and speaking and media literacy, and then the language. So each page is representing a strand, and then the 1 through 10 are the anchor standards. So there are 10 reading, there are 10 writing, there are 8 speaking, viewing, listening, and media literacy anchor standards, and there are 6 language anchor standards. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a minute to look at those, because I think if you look at these, they've got some, this is really good information here, and things that we want our students to be able to do by the time they graduate. I should point out, too, that reading includes informational text and literature, and it does 10 for each one of those. But maybe this chart will help you. This is a chart that represents a section and maximum possible benchmarks for a grade level. So, and one thing that I haven't talked about yet are these K through 5 foundational reading skills. They don't have an anchor standard that they refer back to, but they are important at our K through 5 level. But you can see in reading we have 9 or 10 standards, and that is because literature does not have, it's one shy of what the informational literature or informational text has. So every grade is going to have 9 literature anchors, reading anchor standards, and 10 informational text reading benchmarks, benchmarks. And then for writing, they have, each grade level has 10 benchmarks, and for the speaking, viewing, listening, and media, that one has 8, and then the language you can see has 6. Okay, most college and career-ready anchor standards have one corresponding benchmark at each grade level in our ELA standards. And you can analyze benchmarks vertically to see how expectations increase from grade to grade. So a learning progression. This is another nice thing about our ELA standards, is that we really can take a look vertically and identify what's changing, what's increasing, what rigor is changing. And so I've given you, well, I guess I can do 2 things. On this slide, I've put the document going kindergarten and then on down to grade 12. But I've also given you a document that looks like this. So this one actually goes this way. But it's really, I think, a good tool for teachers to use. So what are my students expected to do? If I'm a grade 6 teacher, what is my students expected to do in grade 5? So what should they be coming in with? What do I need to increase? And then what are they going to be expected to do in the next level? So it really gives teachers a very quick and easy way to see what the expectations are at different grade levels, let alone their own grade level. And so what I've got up here on the screen is our anchor standard 1 for our informational text for reading. And then the paper version I gave you is a reading benchmark for literature. And it's K through 5 on the first page, and then it's 6 through 12. And obviously I didn't give you everything. I just wanted you to have one example of what this looked like. So there is a document like this for every single anchor standard with all the benchmarks on it. So it's a tool that our teachers use a lot. And I just wanted to give you, so if you want to see what that looks like, what are we expecting our students to do through our ELA standards, this is what this is what the things that we're working with. And again, remember, this is just one small section. This would be your entire document of what we need to get through before they graduate. Don't want to rush anyone. I know it's really good reading there, but so just to look back again at this document, or this graph, that really kind of sums up our ELA standards in Minnesota. They're organized into 3 sections, and those sections are divided into strands made up of our college and career readiness standards, and each grade level or grade band has benchmarks that represent a progression of learning. Any questions? How did I do for time?
What states haven't adopted it?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sorry.
You said there's only 2 for.
Well, yeah, there's 48 that have adopted.
I think it's Alaska and,
For English language.
Yeah.
yeah, can't remember the other one.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know.
You know how many states adopted it for math?
I don't know that. I'm sorry. I can look it up and get back
I
to
know
you.
it said in here 43 in this document, but I didn't know if that was.
Is that one that I handed out?
Yeah, it was the frequently asked questions.
Yep, then that would be accurate. That came right off of the Common Core website. Yep,
Yeah, it just says they've adopted the standards, so maybe that's old
that could be. Yeah,
English language.
yeah, that could be.
So with this being in play now for 5-6 years.
Yeah, we had to implement in fall of 2012. Yep.
So what kind of feedback for teachers that were here prior to that and are still here? Have you got any feedback of whether they
You know, I think we're doing things so much differently with our PLCs doing the standards work and our standards-based focused at K through 8, that the teachers, I think, are just very familiar with these and are very comfortable with them. And there is some misconception that this was a huge change from what we were doing. They do align pretty well to the 2003 Minnesota standards that we had that were not Common Core. So I think there were a few changes, obviously, anytime we change standards, but I think that teachers who've been here for a while would say we're doing a lot of the same things. There just seems to be, and this is probably what they would say, just a bigger focus on, we're talking about standards more. You know, we're talking with other teachers about standards more, but I think it also has to do with the other things that we're doing in our district.
Which is good.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And is there funding that comes along with adopting the Common Core, or if you don't do it?
I'm going to let Scott answer that one.
There is. I don't know all the details largely because, honestly, I don't know a school in Minnesota, and I'm sure there are some, but I don't know a school in Minnesota that has opted out of the Common Core. Maybe you do, Amanda.
I don't.
But, what we've been told is that states and or schools that don't participate in the Common Core may have a chance to lose federal funding, and those would be significant dollars, I would assume, if that were to happen. I think the key is the mobility probably is a big thing with just how we've seen students moving so much. And this isn't a Marshall-specific thing. This is really, I think, becoming a Minnesota and nationwide specific sort of situation and ensuring that a student who might theoretically go to school in South Dakota for part of their first grade year or eighth grade year, let's say, and then move to North Dakota for part of their eighth grade year in Minnesota, if they're all a part of the Common Core, at least they're getting, obviously the core instruction is the same, and then the alignment with the MCAs and certainly performing well on those and being proficient and being college and career readiness. That's a national term, that's not a Minnesota term, and that's really been the impetus behind the Common Core back during Governor Pawlenty's time, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it's good as long as Minnesota didn't lower their standards. Our standards are a lot higher than what they are in many states.
Yeah, I don't think that any teacher would say that these are low standards. There's a lot. There's a lot to get through here. So, any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Anyone wanted this? I ran it in case somebody wanted it.
I'll look at
Okay.
it. Thank you, Amanda. Board forum. Does anybody have anything else to bring up?
I would just quickly, if it's all right, draw your attention probably more so to the dates regarding the November 8th school board election. On general election day, I believe we have 3 members whose terms will be expiring this year, and it's the time of year where we just need to start drawing some attention to the specific timelines and different publishing requirements and when the board might need to take action on certain things. So it's not an action item per se as much as an informational item, just that the election is coming up and that the filing period is not too far away, and anyone who's interested in either rerunning or running for school board this year should make note of these, and I'm sure Tricia and others will keep everyone informed and we'll get the word out.
All right. Board committee updates? Anybody have anything you want to bring up? Budget book update.
The budget book is moving right along as far as looking to complete it and be able to present it 2 weeks from today. And we've had a good response from administration and staff and helping provide information. A lot of information will be included in that book, as you're well aware. And so our principals have gotten the information that it was requested of them so that we were able to put it into the format. Jill and Tricia are working on making sure that we hold true to the format process that we've had in previous years. And just initial results as far as the general fund budget, we're looking at a deficit in the general fund. We're probably, at least at this point in time, looking around $200,000 that we would be spending down from the fund balance, our current fund balance. But there's still some tweaks that need to happen to complete that general fund budget, and I'm hoping to get that done in the next couple days here at the district office, and then we'll be able to put the finishing touches on the rest of the chapters and all the information and analysis, and so looking forward to getting that completed and sharing that with you, as I said, in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
Legislative update.
I won't read the memorandum that I put together for you, but just that highlights, I think, some of the educational-related activities that took place during the legislative session, and certainly some good came out of the session, even though it seemed like everything sort of got a little bit convoluted at the end. But there's this week now, and actually today, the application and additional information for voluntary pre-kindergarten classes is available on the website. I believe Bruce and Tiffany and I have a meeting later this week to figure out if that's something that our district should be pursuing. There's a real short turnaround. I think it's July 1st, if I'm not mistaken, for an application to potentially access some of the dollars that were set aside for basically 4-year-old school or courses. Support staff additional funding, funding to address the teacher shortage or teacher crisis in Minnesota, some legislation to reduce paperwork, and a lot of new and in some cases unfunded mandates that we're going to have to get up to speed on and make sure that we're really taking care of and doing what is requested of us. Tomorrow, actually, the Southwest West Central Service Co-op has a meeting in town here where representatives from, I believe, the Rural Education Association, the School Boards Association, and the Superintendent's Association will be out to talk about the legislative session, and I believe Dr. Melcher from the Department of Education will be there as well, and essentially say, here's what it means, and here's our interpretation. It'll be very preliminary, obviously, because of when the session ended, but we'll learn a lot more about what did happen during the session over the course of the next few weeks. And one that we really want to keep our eye on as a rural school district is the, I'll call it a tax credit for ag property, that the Minnesota Rural Education Association and many of us lobbied for with our elected officials. That's a part of the tax bill, which the governor has yet to sign, and it may end up in a special session if he calls one, so we'll have to keep our eye on that, because that definitely would be beneficial to our district residents and our district as well. So I'll keep you updated, but just kind of wanted to give you an overview of some of the things that I think are relevant from the session so far.
We will apply for the pre-kindergarten food support staff in those areas.
I believe we will, although that will be something that we may have to take a look at. You know, the voluntary pre-kindergarten. First of all, there are several criteria. There's a limited amount of money. It needs to be split between metro, suburban, rural, and charter schools. The amount of allocation is based on free and reduced lunch percentage and lack of 3- and 4-star parent aware rated programs. So we may find out at the end of this funnel that we don't qualify for any funding. If that were the case, I'm relatively certain we would not apply. Other types of things, like you talked about, Kurt, the student support staff funding, that's going to be a competitive grant. I don't know the details yet. That may, for example, a lot of competitive grants, immediately, if you don't have 50% free and reduced lunch, you're excluded from being able to participate. That could be a criteria, and we don't. So those are things I'm hoping to find out more about tomorrow. But I think anything in here that we can get involved in and that's going to benefit our students and staff and families, we certainly will look at.
Do we know anything about the teacher shortage and those dollars and what they're wanting to use it for?
We do. I don't have that information handy, but it's sort of a breakdown of some loan forgiveness. I believe that's a part of it. Establishing a task force to take a look at how to address that teacher shortage. There's about 4 or 5 different things, and so we have an idea of that. Again, we'll be looking for guidance from the MDE on the specifics of those.
Are we looking either way of expanding our pre-kindergarten? I've had feedback saying, especially from our own employees, are concerned about having room to put their own kids in.
Are we looking at it? I think are we adding 1 classroom for next year? Where we've
Possibility of 2.
Yep, converted some space. So yes, we're trying to do that. That's a very valid concern, Jeff, that we've heard, and was really, I think, an important part of the building bond referendum and trying to create space so we wouldn't have to turn families away, and including at times our own staff members who, for a variety of reasons, are excluded from that process, not because we want to, but really because of a shortage of space. So
how do they decide who's going? Is it by free and reduced?
some of it is needs-based. Some of it is, I'll say, mandated in terms of some balance we need to have relative to the class composition. And then at some point in time, it almost becomes a lottery and or first come, first served arrangement, which isn't great, but
So there is a logic to it.
yeah. Thank you.
Wow. Anything else? Did anybody pay Kovash's money for golf tickets?
Pot's good.
All right. Thank you. Meeting's over.
They're on their way in.
Late.